For this episode of Gloom Station, I'm going to share with you a subscriber-submitted story by Alex F. Alex was 16 when something evil found its way into his life. It came and went in a matter of days, but the experience has stuck with him for years, and it isn't something he's likely to forget. So dim the lights, find somewhere safe, and listen to the haunting true story of Hannah the doll. My parents are the hardcore yard sale kind of people. The type that show up at 6 a.m. for an 8 a.m. yard sale. Usually they get stuff they can resell at their antique booth, but every now and then they get something they want for themselves. They came back from one of their yard sale hunts with the back of the truck filled with junk, and I had to help them unload it into the garage. I pulled the last item from the truck and saw it was an old doll about 3 feet tall, with a brown potato sack dress, black buttons for eyes, and a red ribbon tied around its neck. I tossed it on top of the pile and my mom actually gasped. She immediately went to the doll and sat her up properly. She fixed the doll's dress and everything before looking at me and giving a distasteful look as if the doll were made of glass instead of cloth and stuffing. That night at the dinner table, my mom randomly said, I think you should apologize to Hannah." This took both me and my dad by surprise. He asked who Hannah was, and I asked what I needed to apologize for. We were both a little shocked when Mom told us that Hannah was the doll in the sack dress, and I should apologize for mistreating her. Dad and I laughed it off because Mom's not one to be serious. She's definitely not the sentimental about junk type, but this time she looked hurt and offended. So much so that she picked up her plate and left the table after seeing us laugh. Now Dad assured me I did nothing wrong, and he went to talk to her in their room, leaving me to awkwardly finish dinner alone. Later that night, my mom came to my room and apologized for what had happened at dinner. I told her it was all good, thinking we could just move past it. But at the end of her apology, she carefully suggested I really should at least consider apologizing to Hannah. She was stuck on it, and I thought it was a ridiculous suggestion. It was hard to fall asleep that night. I kept picturing the doll sitting in the corner of my room. It became so bad I used my phone light to check the corner, which was obviously empty. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I even dreamed of the doll knocking on my door, and I swore every single random noise that night woke me up. I was exhausted all day for school, and when I came home, I found Hannah the doll sitting on the kitchen table, with my mom sitting in the chair just looking at her. Once my mom noticed me, she didn't ask how my day was. Instead, she asked if I was ready to apologize to Hannah. When I looked at my mom, I could tell she was waiting for me to say something, so I just gave in. "Hannah, I'm sorry I tossed you." My mom lit up. She was genuinely excited and thanked me for apologizing to a doll, to cloth and sack. I was just glad to be done with the ordeal. But of course, this was just the beginning. For the next 2 days, my mom was attached to that doll. She started setting Hannah up on the couch while we watched movies. She would set Hannah by the window so she could see outside. She even brought Hannah to the dinner table while we were eating. This one made my dad uncomfortable enough to ask her to put the doll somewhere else while we ate. But my mom shook her head and gave a dismissive smile. Then, in a bit of a tone, she said, "She's fine. She's not doing anything. Is she bothering you?" Then she looked at me. "Is she bothering you?" My dad had enough. He told my mom to remove the doll from the table and put it in the garage with the other junk. My mom looked like he had just slapped her. But she put the doll in the garage and came back to the table. Only she didn't speak to either of us the rest of dinner. That night, while I was asleep in bed, I woke up to the sound of my mom's screams. I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents' room to see what was going on. They were both sitting up in bed and my dad was comforting my mom. When she finally calmed down, she told us she had the most horrible nightmare she's ever had. My dad assured me everything was okay now and for me to go back to bed, as if that was something I could just easily do. But the next day, my mom avoided the garage entirely. She refused to continue helping go through the stuff they had bought over the weekend, and she even asked my dad not to go into the garage. When he asked her why, she just said it didn't feel safe in there anymore. For most of the day, we occupied ourselves with other things until Mom fell asleep on the couch, and Dad saw this as the perfect time to get some work done in the garage. "We just need to put price tags on things," he said. But not 10 minutes after we started, Dad had to move Hannah so that we could check out a box she was on. He carelessly tossed her to the side. She hit the wall, then the floor, and laid in a discarded pile. I swear the room got colder. I felt the hairs on my arms stick up, and the back of my neck felt like goosebumps had appeared. My mouth went dry. What's weird is that my dad felt it too. He looked up at me. We both looked at Hannah lying on the floor. Finally, I had to ask my dad, "Are you going to apologize?" Defiantly, he shook his head and said no, then went back to work. I couldn't help but feel like he should have. As we worked, I kept glancing at the doll on the ground, the same way you'd look at a wild dog sitting too close. We decided to stop before we were actually done with the job. He said he just didn't feel like working anymore. My mom was genuinely upset with us when we came back inside. I didn't dare tell her dad had thrown Hannah. And that night, Hannah took her revenge on my dad. I woke up to my mom gently shaking me awake. She said she was taking my dad to the hospital. He was having chest pains and trouble breathing, and they were worried it was a heart attack. Only it wasn't. The doctors ruled it out, but did say it was most likely a strong panic attack, possibly brought on by a severe nightmare. When we got home that early morning, he said the nightmare was so bad he woke up gasping for air, and he had felt pressure on his chest and thought he was dying. All the while, he could only think of Hannah the doll. I thought he would go back to bed and rest, but instead, when we walked into the living room, he looked around. Then he beelined it for the garage, picked up Hannah and brought her to the car. Then, without saying a word, he left. When he came back, it was without Hannah. He told us he took her back to the house they had gotten her from. He had sat her down at their door, fixed her dress, apologized to her, and left her. Now, I haven't seen the doll since. We don't talk about the doll, and my parents haven't brought another one home. But I know she's still out there. If you see a little doll with a sack dress, black buttons for eyes, and a red ribbon around her neck, don't look at her. Don't do anything mean to her. Just leave Hannah alone, and if you're lucky, she'll leave you alone. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know by liking, subscribing, and going one step further by sharing the link with your friends and family. Now, I know something haunts you too, so if you want me to tell your story, send it to my email listed in the description. Now that's it for tonight's episode. Stay safe out there.